One of the most confusing aspects of your niche and choosing your niche is wondering if you've gone too broad or whether you need to narrow it down. But when you're told to narrow down your niche, what exactly does that mean and how do you do it? So let's talk about that. Now, the first thing I want to get out of the way here is that we are not going to be diving into any keyword research tools. It's not that keyword research tools are bad. They actually definitely have their uses. But the thing is, what I find is that when you're still in that early phase and you're trying to figure out your niche and whether you need to narrow it down and all that, I find that those things usually just introduce a lot more confusion because you get stuck in a big pile of numbers and you're wondering what your threshold should be and all that kind of stuff. So what I want to do is simplify all this and let's just talk about the human beings that we are looking to reach with our site. Because if we stop thinking so much about just the search algorithm, when we start thinking about the actual people that we're looking to serve, this becomes a lot simpler. So how do you know if your niche is too broad and then you got to do something about it? Okay, so let's talk about 4 different things that you can look at to know if maybe you've aimed a little too wide with your niche definition. The first one is that it might be a little difficult to actually determine what your blog's purpose is. This is most common with personal blogs or blogs that, if you look at the top navigation, you see like gardening and finance and like you've just gone like all over the board with the blog and you go to the site and you just can't really tell what the heck you're aiming at. You've definitely gone too broad. Those types of blogs don't work. You need to narrow that bad boy down big time. Your niche might be too broad if you just have constant writer's block. Now, writer's block happens from time to time, but if it's a pretty consistent problem for you and you go to write a post because you sort of feel like you have to, but you really don't know what to say, or you have a hard time getting all that deep on anything and you just sort of stay at the surface level and you're like, should I write another tips post or something? That can be a sign that you've gone way too broad with your market because you don't really know who you're aiming at. You don't really know what they want. And therefore it makes it really difficult for you to know what to write. And so when you go for the really big ones like personal development or finance or lifestyle or some of these really generic niches, this can be the most common thing. You might think that by casting a wider net that it becomes easier because it gives you so many possibilities, but the opposite is actually true. It usually just paralyzes you and you really don't know where to go from there. Another symptom can be that your growth is just stagnated. Now keep in mind here, there are definitely other reasons why the growth of your email list or your traffic or any of that might stall, okay? But if you're in the very early phases and you're just finding that nothing that you're doing converts, that you put out a lead magnet, nobody wants it and all that, it could be because you've gone too broad with your niche because you're trying to reach everybody and because everything that you do doesn't really apply to any particular person real tightly, it doesn't convert and nothing really works. So that can definitely be a symptom of too broad with your niche. Do you define your niche using just a couple of words? That can be a problem too. If somebody were to ask you what is your niche and you just say fitness, personal development, dating, something like that. If in other words, if you can define it in like 1, 2, or 3 words, you haven't defined it properly. You've gone way too broad because those are massive, massive categories and not a niche. And that's something we need to jump into here is exactly what is the niche? And like, if you can't define it like I just said, we've got to define it completely differently. So let's jump into that right now. It's very important to understand that a niche is not your topic. It's not a category, okay? And when you define your niche that way, well, you really haven't defined it at all. And you're just setting up for a recipe of having a really difficult time turning that thing into a business. What a niche really is a need, a real human need or a human desire. That's what it really is. What we're looking for here is a market, and a market has 4 components. First of all, it needs to be a group of people with a clearly defined desire or problem that they want to solve, okay? Number 2 is that they are actively looking to do something about that. Number 3 is that they have the ability to pay for it. And number 4 is that they're willing to pay for it. Like they're not going to have something in their way that's just going to make them never want to spend a dime. What we're looking for here is actually a market, okay? And in order to best define this and really fully define your niche, I break this down into 4 questions. And these questions that we've created a cute little chart here for are, who are they? All right. We want to then look at what is the problem or desire that they want to do something about. We want to ask, how can you connect with them? Like, where are you going to find them out there? How are you going to actually attract them to your blog? And then lastly, what is it that they're actually looking for? Like, do they know what a solution actually looks like? Now, what we have, I've created these little circles to represent those four things, and we're looking sort of at for an intersection there. But right in the middle is you, because this all branches out from you and your ability to actually help them solve that problem and your passion for it and things like that. So you are there as a bit of the hub, like it needs to go around you and your skill set. But then around that, we need to look at these four questions. So let's dive just a little bit deeper into each of those four things. Okay, so first of all, the first question is, who are they? We need to know who we're serving, and we need to really get in there and not just be able to define them in terms of a demographic, like women age 35 to 50 or so. Like, none of that is really that important. What we want to do is dive into their mindset. What are they really looking for? What are they struggling with? What does it feel like for them to have those struggles? This is where we get into what's classically called a customer avatar, okay? And it's a really important exercise, okay? But you want to dive in and really get to know what makes these people tick. And when they're going on Google, imagine them sitting there at their desk and they're typing in something into Google in order to try to find answers to this problem that they've got or some desire that they want to fulfill. What are they entering? What is their intention? What are they thinking? You need to spend some time kind of noodling that one around, because if the more that you think about the human being and less that you get into all the dumb keyword phrases and all that, the better you're going to understand your niche and be able to define it more fully. All right, so part and parcel with that is, of course, going to be what is the problem that they want to have solved, or what is the desire that they want to fulfill. Keep in mind that you are not creating a market here. What you're actually doing is diving into a natural human desire that already exists. And what you're going to be doing is moving it along for them. Okay. And so your market is driven by a human desire, or a desire to either, to get more pleasure in their life in some capacity, in some framework, or to move away from pain. That's pretty much what they're all going to be doing. So what you want to do is you want to clearly define what that is. What is the exact problem that they're looking to do something about? What does success look like to them? What is it going to look like when they solve that problem? And then on the flip side, if it's a desire, like maybe you've got a really strong hobby market, like I do some RV blogging. That's not really solving a problem per se, unless there's something to fix on the rig. It's more like it's just something that I really, really enjoy doing. And there's a lot of others that do as well. And so some blogs, the niche is really to take a natural desire that one has and help move it along further and to connect with other people that have the same market. So clearly define what that is. Put it down, write it down. Don't just do a 1 to 3 words thing, because that's not a good niche definition. Really nail out what is it that they're looking to do something about. Okay, the other thing you need to look at is what is it that they're actually looking for? Now, you might think that when you define what your problem is that you're going to help them solve, or the desire that you want to help them fulfill, that it might naturally just answer this question, but not necessarily, because everybody has a different expectation for what success actually looks like. Okay. And so you want to know what it is that they are looking for. Like if they looked at it on the screen, would it resonate with them that is the answer for them, that is actually going to get them to where they want. And so you really need to dive into that. Sometimes this takes actually talking to some of them, by the way, that we have a whole exercise for that inside the lab, but there's really no better way to learn these things than to actually talk to people who are in that market. You can't just always guess this stuff. Lastly, how are you going to find them? How are you going to connect with these people? Now, this is an important part of actually defining your niche, because sometimes you'll need to narrow this down or change things up just so you know where you can find them. Because let's face it, if you did a really broad definition and just says women aged 35 to 50, well, where are you going to find those people? Where do they hang out? It's so broad that you can't go to any particular place and easily find them. And if you were to run paid traffic on Facebook or something, it'd be such a broad thing that it could be that you're just going to like spread everywhere and spend a lot of money unnecessarily. And so A lot of times when you're actually defining your market, it's useful to actually determine what they're, where are you going to find them and how are you going to bring them in, because we need to know like what types of things are they sharing on social networks, what are they posting in forums and stuff like that, because when you can talk to them on their language in the places that they already are, it's going to be a lot easier to bring them over to your site. And so that's definitely an important component of being able to fully define your niche. Okay, so those 4 questions are really, really important to clearly define what your niche is. And this is a lot more of a thorough way of defining it and a more proper way of defining it. And by the way, doing it in that way is going to really help you better understand it and narrow it down, because it's almost like a natural thing that's going to happen as you go through that process. And it's so much more actionable, so much more useful than just trying to come up with some broad category, which is usually going to be way too broad. Now, we can go a little bit further here, and that is answering 4 different questions, 4 new ones on things that might allow you to even take a well-defined niche and maybe still narrow it down even further. The first one is, can you focus in on one particular aspect of that larger desire or problem? So there's a lot of things that people want to accomplish that you could probably break up into phases, and that it's not, they have a beginning and they've got an end, but in that journey, in that transformation, there's a few different phases that everybody goes through. And so one thing that you could look for in whatever market you're in is, does it break down like that? Does it have certain phases in the process that are kind of typical? And then might it make sense for you to just really concentrate on one of them, okay? So that might be one aspect of being able to narrow down. An example would be like here with the Blog Marketing Academy. It's a really kind of a broad thing in the fact that I'm helping people create a blog-based business from scratch. But let's say that I just wanted to really focus in and narrow down on just the topic of niche selection. And then I had an entire site that was basically just about helping people figure out their niche, which is a fundamental part of the journey. Everybody deals with it, but that would be narrowing it down by focusing on one aspect. Can you focus it down on one particular market segment and just serve them more thoroughly? So what we've got here is a situation where your niche could apply to many different types of people, where they all have the same problem, the same desire, but there's still other aspects of them as human beings that are all over the board. And so it might make it a little bit difficult in some ways to target them. So one thing that you can do is just decide to nominate one group as the one that you're going to focus on the most. So an example of this would be, let's take the Blog Marketing Academy again. Let's say that I created a Blog Marketing Academy just for people who own dental practices. Okay. And so I created something where basically the idea would be to bring a dental practice online and use blogging and content marketing to help promote their dental practice. Well, obviously everything that I say here on the site would then really, really apply to people who own dental practices. And it would be kind of alienating to everybody else. But that would be one way of really narrowing it down. It's just nominating a particular segment of people and really aiming the same basic content toward them. And then it's going to really resonate to those guys, okay? But to the other people, not so much. Could you combine 2 kind of separate markets into one in order to solve a narrower problem for them? I remember a classic example from a guy named Derek Halpern, and he has moved on to other things, but he ran a site called Social Triggers, and he had a classic example of how he was in the internet marketing space, sort of like I am, except that he wrote some articles, if I recall, specifically for massage therapists, and it was the idea of applying internet marketing strategy to massage therapists. And he got published in some magazine for other massage therapists and stuff like that. And it's an idea of taking 2 markets that really don't have very much to do with one another, but kind of combining them. And what also happens is that it allows you to possibly promote your business and get found in a way that otherwise would not happen, and it is not as competitive. Because let's face it, internet marketing is a pretty big space, right? That being said, internet marketing specifically for massage therapists, not so much. So he probably had a much easier time getting recognized over there. And so that's an interesting example. Just take two different markets, like by choosing a subset of people, sort of like the last one, and combining them, and that could be a really effective way of narrowing things down. Can you serve that need in a different way? So this one's easy. Sometimes narrowing down doesn't have to be about your topic or your niche definition, but just how you intend to serve them. So an example of this might be if you're in a market where everything is sort of corporate and dry, like, I don't know, accounting. Okay. And then you decide to have to approach it in a way which is just completely different. Like you're going to come in there, you're going to be the class clown. You're going to have a sense of humor. You're going to make it really informal. Something that's different that makes your content just resonate with people because it's different than everybody else. It's sort of a pattern interrupt inside your market. And that could be a way to narrow it down, so to speak, but just by refocusing how you're approaching it, not necessarily in defining it in a more narrow way. Okay, so let's wrap this thing up, and I want to talk to you just about making decisions here, because here's the thing. At the end of the day, if you are here watching this video and you're concerned about narrowing down your niche and you're still worrying about what your niche should be, then I know that part of the thing here is that you're just simply not making a decision, okay? That you are looking for external signs of proof that what you're thinking is right. And I know exactly where you're at. What you're doing is you're looking to somebody like me to tell you that your idea will work. And you're looking for a guarantee. And so here's the thing. Everything that I've just told you in this video is going to help you better define your niche. And it's going to help you narrow it down if necessary, not by diving into a bunch of keyword tools and complexities and spreadsheets, but by simply thinking about the human being, okay, and how you can best serve them, okay? That being said, ultimately, it still comes down to you simply deciding what you're going to do and then moving forward with it. Nothing that I could say could possibly get around the fact that you need to make the decision, okay? So I want to just leave it with that as my final commentary. I can't give you all the proof that you need that whatever you're thinking is going to work. The only thing that will determine that is the actions that you take from this point forward, okay? So what I want you to do is if you need to go through this exercise to define your niche fully, do it. Brainstorm that, write some things down, and then get this thing as well defined as you can. But then at a certain point, you just say, okay, that's it. And it's time to move on to the next phase. You can't sit there and remain paralyzed by the idea of what your niche should be for that long, okay? It's not even the most important thing you've got to make a decision upon, okay? You could define your niche kind of badly, okay, and still make it work if you really execute on the action afterwards. So it's everything that comes past this point, which is going to be way more important. Just make that decision, stop screwing around, get it done. At a certain point, that you can't make it any more perfect, okay? There's no such thing as perfection. You just get it good enough to where you're like, that seems okay. And then you move forward. Here's the last thing I'll make a point of, is that this is not set in stone. You can change it if you need to, okay? And so this is not a life or death decision. It's not a serious decision. You can get it done. You can narrow it down. And when it feels right, move on, all right? As we end off, keep this in mind. A well-defined niche should be actionable for you. It should flow freely into those content ideas. It should alleviate doubts on who you're talking to, what they want, and how you're going to reach them and attract them. A well-defined niche is going to make your job easier. Generic topics don't do that. And with that said, thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.